welcome. Good evening. Calling to order this meeting of the Montara Water and Sanitary District. It is October 5th, 2023. It is 7:32 p.m. I'm going to call roll. Director Decker.
Here.
Director Slater-Carter.
Present.
Director Sofke.
Here.
Director Young.
Present.
Director Boyd is present. So all present and accounted for. Well, I don't know about accounted for, but we're all present. For my president's statement, I'm going to keep it really short tonight. Today was the hearing before the appeals court. Half Moon Bay appealed the lower court's decision, which ruled against them in their lawsuit against their partners at SAM. Today, the arguments on both sides were heard, and the court tells us that we'll hear something within the next 90 days. So that's my president's statement. Do we have any oral comments for items not on the agenda? I see Greg and then I see Keishan. So let's do it in that order. Greg, please.
There are three things that I want to be sure to mention tonight, whether you wait for the MCC report or now, but let me just outline them. We have an outbreak of hate speech disrupting public meetings, and I want to make sure that you guys are aware of it, and I can talk about that later. I want to mention that we had put out a report on Cypress Point housing project development, and our team put in several matters, comments about things that relate to Montara Water and Sanitary District. And I sent you a copy, as I did every other agency. And my hope is that the district will either confirm, correct, or augment any claims we have made in our report, any concerns, to make sure that they're factual. I have, since that report came out, learned even more, which I would like to discuss with you and your staff, that causes me concern. One of the concerns we flagged was the fire department response, especially if they make Carlos Street one way headed south. And that dovetails, interestingly, with a recent event that you might want to discuss tonight. I don't want to say too much because it's not my place, but we do have concerns about the firefighting response capability. And I hope we'll have a discussion about that as well at some point. So that's my public comment. I can save the rest for the MCC report.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Let's go to Keishan.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I wanted to brief everyone about two upcoming events. First one is on the 14th and 15th of this month. We have the Pumpkin Festival at Half Moon Bay, and Sam has got a booth there. So we'll be having lots of fun items in the booth. We'll have giveaways, good flyers, and some games too. So we would encourage public to come in and visit us at our booth on the 14th and 15th. The next upcoming event is on 18th November. That's a Saturday. And we're going to have an open house at SAM, which is open for all ages. It'll be from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. So we'll have some fun items there. We'll have some games too, as well as plant tour, which is also included. Of course, we'll also have some beverages and light snacks too. So this is just to inform you guys to save the date. And as we get closer, we'll again keep you all informed about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sounds very good. I look forward to seeing you. Do you have any other public comment? All right. Seeing none, let's go to next on the agenda. We have no public hearing. We have the consent agenda. Does any board member wish to pull any item for consideration?
So we'll adopt the consent agenda.
I second.
All right. So Catherine moves, Peter to second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as listed in the agenda packet, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. No old business. We have two new business items, starting with the first one, review and acceptance of the June 30, 2023 GASB 68 actuarial valuation. And I hope we start with explaining what that acronym means.
Please.
Yeah, thank you. So we're receiving this every year. I'm just gonna wing it and try my interpretation of what this would mean, but I'm certain that our consultant can fill in. But I think these are the government accounting standard and I would have said principles, but we'll find out what the CP stands for later. In short, this is now our annual look at how is our pension plan doing. Every other year we adjust accordingly. We just did that this year in February. So we received the GASB 68 report for the prior fiscal year to this one in February and actually adjusted the contribution rates accordingly. This is now this year's outlook, and we are receiving this report that Foster & Foster has prepared as usual, and Catherine Moore is here and can tell us what's in this report. Catherine, if I can just hand this over to you, and maybe you can tell us what the B stands for in GASB.
That stands for board, and we add the S for statement at the end, but I think we're the only ones, and we talk about removing it. So thank you for having me. Let me share my screen. Okay, do you see my report?
Yes.
Let's share my screen. Thank you. Okay, so these are the GASB 68 accounting information for the plans, PARS retirement, PARS retirement plan. These are numbers that will go into the 6/30/23 financial statements. And these are very similar. This report is very similar to what we've presented before. I will just dive in with a little bit of information because the dates can get a little confusing. We are using a measurement date of 6/30/2022. So everything that we're looking at is what happened during 2021-22, but we're going to use these numbers for the 23 reporting. And we're also, all these calculations are based on our 6/30/21 actuarial valuation. So that's the last full valuation we did that was presented earlier in January this year that collected new data and ran all our calculations for that. So we've taken those results and projected them forward to the 6/30/22 measurement date for this report. So the next several slides just cover the note disclosures for GASB 68. There's a little bit of plan information that's required to disclose. Since you are pre-funding with PARS, you're considered an agent multiple employer since they take care of the plan accounting information. Next in the disclosures, we have the long-term expected return on assets. The plan is invested in the PARS Capital Appreciation Fund. So this asset allocation was provided by PARS. It's the 75% equity, 20% fixed, and 5% cash. And then over on the right-hand side, we have our Foster & Foster assumptions for what each asset class earns. And this is based on our survey of investment advisors. And based on that, the expected returns plus the 2.5% inflation assumption, we're using an expected long-term rate of return on assets of 6.25%. And we're also using 6.25% as the discount rate. And this is the same as we used in last year. Next, for the disclosures, we have the number of covered participants. And these are, again, are as of the measurement date of 6/30/22. And so there are 2 retirees currently receiving benefits and then 8 active employees. Okay, so now we get into the net pension liability. Over on the left-hand side, we had the results from last year as of for 6/30/22 reporting. And at that time, the plan was overfunded, so you had a net pension asset of about 200,000 and was 119% funded. We'll see on the next page what happened during the past fiscal year, but the liabilities increased and the assets decreased. And so you are ending up with a net pension liability of about 41,000. However, you are still very well funded at just under 97%. So this page explains what happened during the year. On the left-hand side, we have the pension liability. During the year, we increased that with service cost. That is the benefits that were accrued during the year. We increased also by interest for the year, and then we decreased the liability by the amount of benefit payments that were paid out during the year. So we end up with a 1.2 million liability at the end of the year. Now, for the assets, this middle column, GASB calls the assets the fiduciary net position. So the big item that's happening here is that, remember, we are looking at 21-22 changes, and there was a 13% asset loss that year. So that's what's driving the change from net pension asset to net pension liability is mostly due to this. So even offsetting the loss by the contributions that were made during the year, you're still getting a decrease of about 69,000 in assets for the year to come up with the 41,000 net pension liability.
Can you explain the loss? I'm new.
Oh, say that again?
Could you explain the loss? Because I'm new.
Okay, these are actual asset numbers that came from PARS. So this is, that's just, it was 21-22 was a bad year for investments all around. And so that's just where the plan ended up, was with this 13% loss. Are you asking also about the other pieces of the assets?
PARS manages pension funds, and this money is invested with PARS. And during that 12-month period, the asset value declined.
But they don't balance it as they go. Like if I were looking at my assets, which are small, but if I see a stock starting to go way down, I get rid of it and buy something else.
It's a pension fund, and they do manage the fund, and the fund declined in that 12-month period.
So there's underlying assets that made it underperform.
Yeah, and you can go online and read all about.
But they don't balance it when they see it's
I'm
dropping.
not going to speak to their policies.
Okay.
They're a managed fund.
Okay, they
and
managed it.
Many funds that year had a tough year.
Okay, it's the market drop.
Yeah,
I think
that's
we
right.
actually have the fund portfolio on our website.
Okay, I just,
Yep.
I'm tired. I was in traveling early this morning. So go ahead. I just was shocked to see 199 in parentheses.
A lot of people lost a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something going on.
I did too.
The 13%.
Yeah. Go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, the 13% loss is in line with other funds that we're looking at. I will tell you that, next year we're going to use the 22-23 actual assets, and for that this past year, that's a 10% gain, or 10%, investment gain. So
I'm sorry, so you get it's a 10% what?
Gain.
Gain?
excuse me, not gain, 10% return for next year.
Return is different than gain.
Yeah, I know, I apologize. It's return.
Let's go through the chair. The crosstalk is getting hard.
Sorry.
Catherine, please, if you continue.
Okay, so moving on. Next in the disclosures, we have the sensitivity of what the net pension liability would look like if we were to change the discount rate 100 basis points. Since the plan is very close to 100% funded, small changes in the liability are going to lead to a kind of big differences in the net pension liability. So if we were to value the plan with a 7.25% discount rate, the liabilities would decrease, and so you would get a net pension asset of about $170,000. And then on the flip side, if you were to decrease the discount rate, the liabilities would go up and your net pension liability would also increase. And so this is just a required disclosure under GASB 68. Next, the pension expense that you'll report for the year is $104,000. And the pension expense is not tied to cash. What GASB 68 does is move the net pension liability to the balance sheet, but it says, and so the expense is supposed to be a measurement of the changes in the net pension liability from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, except GASB didn't want this to be a volatile number. So they have some changes in the liability are not recognized right away. Some of them are recognized over several years. And so those amounts that have not yet flown through expense are called the deferred outflows and inflows. And so this disclosure just summarizes the pieces of changes of the liability that happened in the past that have not yet flown through expense. And so you have the deferred outflows and the inflows, and the sources of those are when experience is different from what we expect, from changes in assumptions, from when and plan investments don't earn exactly what we expect them to. And then finally, this last piece, the 74,601, is the only number in the report that actually represents a 22-23. And those are the contributions the district made to the plan during the year, during 22-23. And those are considered an outflow. So of all these deferred outflows and inflows that have not yet been recognized in expense, this disclosure just shows how they'll be recognized in future years. Next, we have a quick summary of the important assumptions used. We've covered most of them. There's a 6/30/21 valuation date and a 6.25% expected return on assets. We are using the assumptions from the 21 valuation, where we picked up the newest CalPERS experience study and the newest mortality improvement projection. Finally, we're just disclosing that we've made no assumption changes since the prior measurement date. So that's all the note disclosures in the report, and the next several slides are the required supplementary information. They cover a lot of the information that we already looked at. This is just but except they're formatted a little bit differently. And in your financial statements, you'd want to show up to 10 years worth of information, but we're only showing the 1 year here. Again, so this is just the reconciliation of the total pension liability that we saw in the front and the reconciliation of assets. Here is a little bit more information that we didn't see up front was we show the net pension liability as a percent of covered employee payroll as 4.9%. Also in RSRs, we have a schedule of employer contributions that compares what the district actually contributed compared to what was the recommended contribution. And since you're making the recommended contribution as a percent of payroll, the contributions were as expected. And as a percent of payroll, the contributions were 8.4% for the year. Finally, in the RSIs, we just have a quick summary of the assumptions used to calculate that recommended contribution. And those are the same that were used for the pension liability. So the rest of the report is just supporting information that explains how the numbers in the front are calculated. I wasn't planning on talking about that. Is there anything you'd like me to talk about more, or would you have any questions?
Okay, I see questions from 2 board members and 1 member of the public. Let's start with Sid and then
I
go to
think it was
Bill
on
and
page
then we'll,
14.
hang on.
Sorry.
We're gonna start with Sid, we'll go to Bill and then to Greg. Sid, go ahead.
I think it was on page 14, there was a minus number. Is that what you paid out in benefits? I'm not sure if it was 14 or some. Maybe 13. I can't remember because you were scrolling fast. That one, benefit payments. Does that mean somebody retired and that's the withdrawal? It was on minus numbers.
You have 2 inactives currently receiving monthly benefits. So those are just ongoing.
It was some benefits you paid out. I couldn't hear what you said.
You have 2 retirees receiving monthly benefits.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay. And then there was a percentage rate that you said. Was that based on the Fed funds rate or the discount rate? It was up higher up the list. At one point, you mentioned that it was based on a certain interest rate or I can't remember what you called
We're
it.
using this 6.25%.
Discount rate. What's the discount rate based on?
Since we projected there are enough funds in the trust and that you are going to continue contributing to the trust to be able to pay all benefits from the trust in the future, we can use the long-term expected rate of return on assets as the discount rate. So we're using the 6.25%.
But that's not a Fed's discount rate or something.
No, that's
Okay, thank you.
That's something that we develop based on your asset allocation.
Okay.
All right, Bill.
Thank you for making all that detail very transparent and visible. I'm a bit frustrated because I consider myself a numbers guy. I've been a quantitative scientist since a teenager, basically. And I'm used to doing lots of graphs and scatter plots and understanding variability and norms and stuff. And I think you've technically told me everything that the state of California requires you to tell me, and yet I understand almost nothing. Here's 2 things I think I got from it, and then I'll say what I'd like to know. The things I think I got are that the main thing which happened over the last year or something was roughly 10% drop in the market, which was not hedgeable, and thus we lost about 10%, and everybody else probably did, and that's just a thing. The other thing I see is that moving forward, a tiny change in inflation or the discount rate or something like that means the difference between us being 300,000 underwater and being 100 and something in the clear. So those are the 2 big effects that I saw using my parsing, and maybe they were required. I don't know which parts of requirement, but I also don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to vote on something, and I have not heard any risks. I have not heard any outliers. I don't know what's important and what isn't important. And if in just a minute or so, someone could tell me what the big news is in this, then I'll be able to actually make a decision. Okay.
I can respond to that at least partly, Catherine. So, Bill, there is no decision to be made. There's no action report item. So this board is simply receiving this report. All you're doing is you're receiving the report. And here comes the part where Catherine can help maybe add a little more, but next year, when we look at this same procedure again, that's when we adjust accordingly. Let's hope that Catherine is right, because we all understand that the past fiscal year, we're looking 2 years in the rear right now, right? So next year, we're looking actually at last fiscal year, right? And that was one where the stock markets performed much better. So if you stayed at the 10%, we go in the other direction. So next year, there's going to be an action that we asked you to do.
So I don't need to think this year.
I didn't. So Catherine, please compliment to what I said. And I probably didn't answer it properly.
Catherine, was that about right?
Absolutely. This to us, this is just an accounting report. It goes in the financial statements. we do a full valuation every 2 years, and that's where we look more at making recommendations for what you should be contributing to the plan.
So let's go to Greg.
One easy question and then one related to what Bill just brought up. You showed a table, a list of future year financial impacts going out 5 or 6 years. If I understand correctly, that's based on current knowledge and situation. Those numbers are not binding and they're going to change every single year you do this analysis. Is that correct?
Yes, these numbers here are just based on the deferrals that we have at 6/30/23, but next year there's going to be new deferrals, so these will change.
Okay, now back to the point Bill was raising. Inflation is assumed in here at 2.5%. We're just looking online. Over the last 20 years up to 2019, the construction cost rate of inflation was 3.5% over 20 years, and then it went up a lot. The CPI, I'm looking at some websites showing a long-term inflation rate of 3.68%. So one question is, which type of inflation are you mirroring? Consumer price inflation or the cost of doing business, construction cost? And then related to that, what are the implications for the discount rate of using a more accurate rate of inflation?
Okay, we're looking at CPI. We consider this a long-term assumption. We are basing this, we reset this in late 2021, which we know is bad timing. We did a survey just of what others are expecting the inflation to be, and no one was using as high of inflation as what we were using at that time, which was 2.75. So we did reduce it to 2.5%. We really see this as a long-term assumption, and then we will reconsider it in a few years, but we think it's appropriate for the time being.
Well, my caution to the board then is, I don't think it's appropriate. And I think you need to pay attention to this. As she said, you're going to reevaluate this in a year or so. And some of you may remember one of the reasons I got involved in the board was when you were considering the pension plan, defined benefit versus defined contribution. And I was running spreadsheets out 55 years to evaluate the impact. This is today not a major risk factor, but it bears watching. And the discount rate and the inflation rate are key assumptions, and please pay attention going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Sid, sure.
What is the life expectancy that you're basing it on? Because I read recently, because of COVID, it has dropped to 78.5 years old.
I don't have the life expectancy on hand. We are using the CalPERS mortality tables. They have a whole lot more data than we do just for this plan. So they're looking at all their participants and looking at the mortality and developing probabilities of mortality. So that's what we're using. I don't know.
Okay, I didn't see it, so I was asking. And then these interest rates are just kind of based on some numbers. So it could go way up or it could go way down. We don't know. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball on the interest rates, right?
No, we don't.
And then that's more of a PARS thing. It's not us. Is that right?
You're using PARS to manage your funds.
Yeah, so they picked that number out of their hat, basically.
No, the discount rate was a decision made by the board,
Okay.
informed by study,
Okay.
because you have to set some targets when you're going to do this kind of thing, and you have to decide how much risk to take, how tight to dial it in. But that's also part of why every couple of years, I think, we come back in, look at actual performance, look at projections, and see if we want to adjust the things that we can adjust.
Well, there was one chart where it looked like we weren't going to be in the red, and the other one where we would be. So that's why I was asking.
A lot of charts.
I know. I don't
and
remember.
every,
You mean last time they made a decision?
When we began this process,
Okay.
we took a look at, okay, what happens if it goes really good? What happens if it goes really bad? What's likely to happen? It's a little bit like looking at predictions of hurricane storm tracks. For the
Yeah,
next one, just look how many different possible tracks it can take, and then what you're looking for is what's the likely way it's going to go. And then there's no crystal ball.
okay,
This study is also part and parcel of the audit. So as the auditor proceeds with his work, he looks for this kind of information to make the audit complete. And since he's working on it now, this report comes
I
time.
see. Good. Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay. All right, Peter, I see your hand.
Yes, just hoping to kind of add some context and possibly just shed some more light. If you would, then can I share my screen, please? Because as we were saying, so this GASB 68 report, this is for our audit report, and here's what I want to bring up, basically just to contextualize. What do we have here? So this was from our 6/30/2020 to 6/30/2022 audit report. We are currently working on 6/30/2023, but what you see here is our net pension asset. This 199,762, which is what you saw on this screen here. Let me bring it up. 199,762. This is our net pension asset. Because it said this was our asset last year. Okay, so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because what this report is basically for our audit report. Pre-GASB 68, these liabilities or assets existed for a lot of agencies, but they were not on the books. And GASB 68 was implemented so agencies had to bring the liability because a lot of people basically knew there were large liabilities out there that were not being dealt with. And so that's what GASB 68 was designed to do. Our plan is still in its infancy. It was adopted as of 6/30/2016, I believe. Sorry, my quick scrolling. But on this page here, page 40, you can basically see throughout the entire lifespan of our plan, we've had an asset the entire time. This will be the second time as opposed to our first year where we actually had a liability. I say all this because I said this is really it's for our audit report. Every 2 years, Foster performs what we would change or possibly change to our contribution rates. That is the alteration between what the district and what employees will contribute. So these two factors here. The last one, we actually raised it up for the district from 7.01% to 7.3%. So I say all this just as far as we have to go through this because I said there's really no way to capture and account for this liability or asset. And even at the way it is now, it's probably not the best if you talk to people as far as, it's a best guess based on all these actuarial tables and the discount rates. And you have the discussions about discount rates. 0.25% there is a wild swing. Our plan is that for as long as it's been in existence, we've never had more than 9 participants. And now we have 8 with 2 retirees. So I said it's still very new. And like I said, the district has made a concerted effort to continue to contribute and to make sure that those actuarial plan assets are where we don't want to get into a situation to where we have these unfunded liabilities that are going to take, potential major changes in order to get them funded. So I said, I think we've been doing a very good job of that. But I said, this report here, it is just so that we know what goes on our audited financials. It has to do with our contributions. The contributions is every other year, and that dictates this piece as far as what we contribute. But as you guys saw, a lot of it is, like I said, $168,000 of value decrease. Well, we had no control over that. I said PARS manages this plan. They do a really good job. We get the PARS statement, and we saw some very wild fluctuation. And in your guys' board packet, every month we present the the PAR statement as well as the district contribution to both employee and employer. So you guys can see all that to see like, oh, yes, wow, this was a very wild fluctuation down. But the very next month, I mean, as it stands now, I said it's not a huge amount of money, but it's over $1 million. We're at $1.4 million of plan assets as of statement date yesterday. So it's like I think we're doing a great job. But I said this report here, it's a lot to digest. But I said in the end, it's like, all right, they're just trying to basically give us a number for our financial because we have to do this.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Lots of context.
That did help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. So it sounds like we received the report and we move on to the next item.
That sounds like.
Could I ask one more question?
Okay.
So our goal is to have no unfunded pension liability at some point, right? We're paying extra.
Nothing more than we can manage, right? And no would be manageable.
Yeah.
It's like even 40. I mean, we prefer to be positive, but a little negative is like, look, this is something for a long period of time,
right?
And all of the liability doesn't come due all at once. It has a lot to do with how long people work
and when they retire,
and when they retire, and when they no longer need the plan. So
if that unfunded pension liability was high when someone wanted to retire, would you have to tell them, sorry,
no,
we don't have any
we
legally still have to pay it?
No, we have an obligation. This is how we work with the people who work for us to help them accrue resources to help them when they retire after serving here at the district for many years.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to item 2, review and possible action concerning approval of Sam's request, Sewer Authority Midcoast's request to replenish emergency reserves fund shortfall.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. We received a request from SAM management to replenish the emergency reserves at SAM. They were tapped into with last winter's emergency repairs. So that's the SAM pipeline system that failed right over here. And also the additional SAM treatment plant storm damages that SAM had to essentially utilize some of that money. And so there is $266,350.10 missing. The district's asked to contribute $51,805. And we recommend that the board adopts the attached resolution that authorizes that transfer to SAM. And I thank Christine for putting here some language into the resolution that essentially holds the city accountable for failing to comply with the SAM reserves if, again, they fail to pay or object to pay for this request. And also points to, of course, the contractual obligation under the JPA to approve general budget, which both funds the maintenance and operations of SAM. So again, the recommendation is to adopt the resolution of the Montara and Sanitary District consenting to the funding of Sewer Authority Midcoast Emergency Reserve Fund shortfall, and that's fiscal year 23-24. We have Christian Prativati, the SAM Borough Manager, here to add to what I said or answer any questions. And so, Kishan, if there is anything that you think is worth sharing with the board at this time, please do.
Thank you, Clemens. I think your staff report is very clear. Just wanted to reiterate the fact that we are pursuing funding from the insurance as well as with FEMA. We still haven't heard anything as yet, although discussion is going on and we are in an advanced stage with FEMA. There's a very good chance that we are going to get money. In fact, FEMA has told us that they will ensure that we are back to the same position financially where we were prior to the storm. So, which means that if the insurance doesn't pay, they'll make sure that FEMA pays completely. So, but it's a matter of time. So, before we can get those funds, it's necessary that we prepare ourselves for the upcoming winter storm and make sure that we have enough reserves. And that's why this request was put up. I'm here to answer any questions, as well as we have our financial consultant, Peter Medina, also, who assists me with all this accounting stuff. Thank you.
Sid?
Keishan, when was the last time you communicated with the people at FEMA following up on our original application for the insurance money?
To be honest, last that I communicated with them was yesterday when I had to sign some paperwork. I signed some paperwork for about 800,000, which has got approved, and we got information today saying that's been awarded. But still, such time it gets obligated, a couple of steps. But at least 800,000 is a sure shot. They said it's been awarded, but I don't know when we'll get the funds.
Right. I didn't think you would because no one has a crystal ball about our government. But and the other thing is I'm fully in favor of passing this, but what happens if one of the member agencies doesn't want to kick in their money? Would we be like, I remember hearing you say one time before that if we couldn't fund something that Sam would have to close down. That's not the case. This is just an emergency money, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we hope if somebody doesn't want to pay their share, then we just have to hope that there's no emergency. Is that it?
Well, it limits our flexibility to address emergencies, sure.
Right.
Catherine?
Okay.
As a SAM board member, I would recommend that we contribute this money, whether anybody else does or not.
Mhm.
We have some nasty weather coming.
Yeah.
The only question is how nasty. And so we need to protect our public health interests.
Mhm.
If something happens and we don't have adequate money, even though Montara and probably Renata have contributed money to SAM, I guess then we have a discussion with our apt
Legal counsel.
legal counsel. Exactly, because SAM is critical to the functioning of the public health on the entire coast, from neighborhoods to beaches. So I recommend that we vote for this.
Thank you.
So moved.
All right, we had a motion. Let's go ahead and get a second, and then we can continue discussion.
I thought I made the motion.
I'm second.
Then you second it.
Yeah, thank
Okay, so Catherine with the motion, Sid with the second. Peter?
Since I'm on this SAM board member, I don't have the impression after our last SAM board meeting that any of the parties is not willing to contribute to that minimum 1.25 million.
Thank you, Peter. I'll just draw everyone's attention to the portion that our council added to the resolution. And I'll just read a little bit of it. Whereas to the extent that member agency, the city of Half Moon Bay objects, refuses, or fails to contribute its proportional share to replenish the ERRF shortfall in accordance with the request for reserve funds, or contributes its share under protest of funds being replenished for emergency repairs to the IPS, it is the intent of this board to hold the city fully accountable for all costs, damages, and adverse consequences arising from and associated with its failure to comply with the policy concerning emergency funds related to the IPS, as more fully set forth in our resolution from June 28th. It goes on a little bit, but I think that carries the spirit of this. I just want to be sure that we know that when we're voting on this, that we're including this intention clearly spelled out. So thank you, Christine. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries 5-0. So thank you, Keishan. We'll get that money over to you. Thank you, and best wishes on the preparations for the coming weather.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for doing that. All right, we are now down to reports. Sewer Authority Midcoast side.
I'm sorry, I didn't review my notes.
Yeah.
So Peter, would you take that?
We don't always need to say anything if there's nothing really, above the line.
I think there are lots some more getting to bring up any issues that it wasn't. So,
Okay, we'll keep it short then. Midcoast Community Council, Greg, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I just want to say a little more. Apparently, Pacifica City Council at their last meeting had 13 people call in with various varieties of hate speech, racial prejudice, and so forth. This is a trend that has started and has continued throughout the state. I've been in touch with the county council, Pacifica, and some other cities. Fortunately, I guess Montara has not yet had this. The things that we cannot do are cut off speakers, although we can comment when they're off topic or off the agenda for the entity. In other words, if it's outside the jurisdiction of the MCC or the water district. But we're going to hope to get some guidelines soon. Some of the coping actions might include, and I hate to say this because we have an open dialogue these days, suppressing remote public comment and requiring people to show up in person, or moving public comment to the end of the agenda. In our case, that would be just before future agendas. I just want you to be aware that this is apparently happening to a distressing degree throughout the country, and it has started to happen here. Separately, as I mentioned, I've sent every agency locally a copy of our comments on Cypress Point, and I'm hoping for some form of review. We want to make sure that what we identified as risks and concerns are fact-based. If they're not, we want to correct them. I have become aware since that report was produced of some other disturbing news about the permeability of the soil underneath Cypress Point. It apparently is excellent, which means that if that surface were covered with impermeable surfaces, 150,000 square feet, we would lose an extremely valuable retention pond. It's not unlike the granite aquifer that is so permeable up in the mountain. And that runs the risk of further stormwater flooding Highway 1 and Moss Beach. I think that's all I'll say, but I do have a concern about firefighting response that I think I'll let others speak to when they feel the time is right.
All right, Bill?
Just one comment to what Greg said about the hate speech intruding itself more and more. This is unfortunately a very predictable and globally widespread problem as two different forces come into collision. One is essentially the attention economy, where more and more people feel the need to get attention and they can't get it from real life, so they try to get it anywhere they can. And the other is the availability of mechanisms to intrude in places you otherwise couldn't go and interact with people you don't have to confront, look in the face, or deal with consequences. So the idea of consequence-free intrusion for the sake of getting your own attention at the expense of public discourse, that is a general problem. And you're right, probably the only way to really cut it down is to remove the ability of remote people who aren't constituents to just show up and derail everything. So that's the scientific view.
All right, thank you, Bill. Catherine, and then Sid.
Thank you.
Okay.
My hand was up first, so.
Oh, well, it really matters who I call. So if I look one way first.
I will note that if you go into many public offices, you will see many employees only and small bands and carpets that say employees only. Do not pass this line, whatever it is, because there is a new industry of coming in and harassing employees to get them to react badly. And I see this might likely be an outgrowth of that, is an attempt to have people, for civility and for clarity of mission of an agency or a meeting space, trying to disrupt it and then claiming that they've been terminated.
Exactly.
And I'm sorry, what used to be, when I go into sewer authority mid-coast side, it used to be you walked up, now the gate's locked. They have to check out your car before you can come in. When you come in the front door, there are mats and barriers to keep you in front of the desk to protect our employees. This level of grotesque incivility, our legislators need to deal with, because I can see if you tried to stop somebody from speaking, you would all of a sudden have a brown ash suit. So let's, Greg, I'd be happy to work with you. I'm sure they all know about it, but this has to be handled at our legislature. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh Becker's office is working on something right now. Sid?
Oh, two things about what Greg said. I did watch the Pacifica video, and as soon as the first person came on, it was during not the public comment part, but some other item, and they told him he couldn't talk because it wasn't the right item. But then he came back on, and it was all white supremacist stuff. So they quickly, after the first guy, said, let's meet, let's take a pause. And I'm sure the attorney told them just limit speech to 1 minute, but they had to listen to 13 more people rambling on about Hitler and everything else. So it was really shocking what the first guy said. But anyway, the second, and I think that could be an issue. Probably not, our board is pretty small, but Pacific is a bigger board, but they're probably targeting, like you say, up and down the state. Secondly, about the permeability of the soil at Cypress Point. I haven't been up there too recently, but I recall near the water tanks that there's quite a bit of erosion and runoff that comes from uphill. Is that true still, or does the water flow down from Upper Moss Beach Heights past our tanks and down on out of the Mid-Penn property?
Yeah, I mean, there is this
Gully.
section, kind of like a drainage system from Lincoln Street, and everybody's aware that actually the upper section of that property directly adjacent to Lincoln Street is flooding on a regular basis with rain events. And so yeah, there is some water running down, and the road in front of the tanks has been eroding
for years.
For years.
Yeah.
We keep on fixing it.
And I did remember attending on a huge downpour when the schoolhouse tank was being christened, when Paul Perkovic was still on the board.
That's right.
And it was raining hard, and it looked like it was just that lot up there by adjacent to Lincoln Street was just total mud. And it looked like a lot of mud down closer to the tanks too. So I personally put in a comment to the Cypress Point saying that, I would like them to not use impermeable driveways and stuff. They're going to have enough permeable shedding from the rooftops and everything. Then they could percolate more water, but they didn't want to because it's going to cost more, they say. But anyway.
By the way, this is true for any development.
Yes.
In town. Just quit. So
okay, that's it for me.
Catherine?
I just wanted to caution people when this hate speech is going. You can't generalize to the politics of the hate speech speaker, because hate speech is defined, and to be disruptive, you will choose your words to make the biggest impact, not that you necessarily believe it.
People in the audience gasped. It was very awful.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got the attention.
But they let them talk for a minute each after that.
Yep. Okay. So some speech I can control. Let's move on to CSDA and LAFCO.
Nothing to report.
All right. Thank you. Attorney's report, Christine?
Nothing to report.
All right. Thank you. Any director's reports? General manager's report?
nothing.
All right. Do we have any items put for future agendas? Nope. Okay. So if something comes to mind, contact me or Clemens. We are going to we're going to recess for PCT to tear down. We're going to reconvene then in closed session. We'll be talking about the Half Moon Bay case, a new case about aqueous film forming foams products liability litigation. This will be interesting. And then two potential cases of initiation of litigation. If we take any action, we will report out after we come out of closed session. With that, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us tonight, participated, and helped make this public process what it is. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you. And we are now in recess.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.